All right, welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. You know, I've got this thing about comedy. I love it. I think it has to do with the fact that I'm very, very weak at it. And so it's envy. But I do enjoy it. And so, and in fact, I've, done acting courses, and I've done a little bit of stand-up, but very, very little. And in fact, in November, I am emceeing a comedy show with several different guests on, and I'll be, doing a little, I guess you could say, material in between. But I tell you, there's no area to me that is more challenging in terms of presentation. I've spoken to over 15,000 people, and in fact, I spoke to over 40,000 people in a single audience once. The thing was filled and packed, and I think I would find that easier than speaking to 100 or 200 doing pure comedy, because there's very few areas where immediately whether or not it's working, like comedy. When you give a speech, which is what I typically do, I do a dozen or so speeches every year. They're not here to make them laugh. They're not there to, hear me make them laugh for an hour. They're here to get content. And, if I get 3 or 4 laughs in between the beginning and the end, that's a good speech. But I'm telling you, comedy, that's tough stuff. And we have a guest here today who's actually going to be offering a workshop here in the Houston area named Marc Isaacs. And I tell you, this is a tough field. And I've been told, you do look like Tim Allen. You have that kind of Tim Allen look about you. And Tim Allen is awesome. Most people don't realize, because they've seen him in sitcoms, that's where he got to start, was actually in jail, and then he worked his way into sitcoms. And so you didn't get started in jail, did you, Mark?
I've not been to jail yet. Emphasis on the yet.
I'm telling you, I've heard a lot of comedians, and some of the best material comes from jail.
Jail or abusive parents?
Abusive parents, absolutely. And although my parents weren't like overtly, abusive, my family was dysfunctional enough. I got volumes and volumes of material, but unfortunately, I have too much shame and guilt to use it on a stage. And so, my parents, my mom's passed away, but her tentacles, survive even today, keeping me in line. So, it's kind of scary. I think I might need to go see a therapist about this. But, and that is kind of the interesting thing about comedy. It comes out of our pain often.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, you take those abusive situations you had as a kid, or those embarrassing situations as a kid, and you turn them into comedy gold. I mean, you find some way to look at them and make them funny, because at the time they weren't funny. I remember in 5th grade, I was waiting to be picked up by my basketball coach, and I waited 3 hours. He never showed up.
Yeah.
He decided to start his own son instead. So at the time, that was kind of a painful moment. Now I look back and think, this poor kid standing in his parents' driveway, looking pathetic, waiting to play basketball, and it's funny to me now. I mean, it's absurdly funny to me now. But at 5th grade, it was tragic.
It was tragic, absolutely. But in retrospect, you probably thought of some of the crazy thoughts that went through your head, or observations as you made, as you waited there, because I'm sure you didn't have an iPhone then.
No. This was way back in the decade, I think, known as the 1980s, I believe it was called. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And so, that's that. It's funny though. It's exactly right. And so you look back on it now, and you kind of look back on it differently. And I've seen some interesting interviews, in fact, about how some comedy troupes have begun to work relationships with therapists to help, because apparently the suicide rate among comedians is pretty high.
I've heard that. I mean, I don't know if it's on the same level as, say, Army soldiers, but the fact is that a lot of them, resort to drugs, alcohol. They end up in rehab for a long time, or just continuously depressed. I mean, Richard Lewis is one of those guys, well documented, who has had
he's hilarious.
But he's fantastic, funny. But inside, personally,
and I think it's probably had a devastating effect on his career. Mm-hmm. That show he did with Jamie Lee Curtis I thought was brilliant.
Loved that show. It didn't last very long, unfortunately.
What the heck was that show called? But anyway, it was brilliant. It was very well done. He's hilarious. He's got so much angst. He doesn't have to open up his mouth, and the angst just ooze out of him in a humorous sort of way.
Well, and it's productive too, because I think you can take that angst and that in the problems you're having and channel them into something funny that we can all relate to. I mean, we all relate to funny things. I mean, this week I found a package destroyed on a Houston street. It was run over hundreds of times, and I opened it up inside. My daughter was with me. We opened it up inside. We find it's a birthday gift for a Houston girl. We open it. We see this $100 check, and we return it to the people it belongs to. And I'm thinking, that was a mistake that was just waiting to happen, and we somehow corrected it and took that bad opportunity and made sure it was a good thing. So we've turned something bad into something good, which people tend to do all the time. But comedians, it's especially important to take our worst fears and share them with the audience, because in being uncomfortable, we're probably more authentic than we ever are.
Yeah, and so and that is a phenomenal story, because again, I think back to my own dysfunctional family, right? And so this was probably a family member sending a check to another family member. You didn't even acknowledge my daughter's birthday. I mean, what is up? You can see how this spirals for months, maybe years to come. And so think of all the family drama you took away from them, though.
Exactly.
All the great material for that kid to use, when she decides to become a comedian.
I just robbed her of a wonderful experience. So sorry. I'm so sorry.
So comedians tend to be kind of neurotic. Do you think you're neurotic?
I think I am neurotic. I mean, I think that I look at the world in a way that I'm instantly judging people. Not in a necessarily negative way, but I'm sort of
Sizing them up,
assessing them, seeing if they're going to be either helpers or hinderers. Because everyone in the world is either helping or hindering you. Sometimes they're doing both, actually.
Yeah. So you kind of have a utilitarian view of people?
Pretty much. Can you help me right now? Can you help me later?
Hey, at least you're honest about it. Will you try to use me, or am I going to get to use you?
And sometimes it goes both ways, too. I mean, sometimes I meet people who I realize that, it's simultaneous help. Or maybe we're simultaneously hindering each other. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe a sick codependence.
Perhaps, yes. I was married for 10 years, so I can relate to that.
So how long have you been doing comedy? 10 years.
Pretty much since I was a kid. Growing up with 4 brothers and sisters, the comedy came from having to get your mother's attention. Having to compete with your siblings and just tell the funniest story, the best story. The worst thing happened to me today at school. The best thing happened to me. Whatever it was, you had to top your siblings.
So was your family dysfunctional?
Oh, completely, yeah. I mean, very, very.
You wouldn't have anything to say on the stage if it weren't.
No, and I love them for it. I mean, I love the fact that they were quirky. I mean, I have a sister who collected all kinds of weird things like toenails. Seriously, pencil shavings.
Let me ask her: were they just her toenails or toenails in general?
I'm so glad you asked that question.
Is that a weird question? Or
That's
what?
A great question.
Thank you.
I assume.
See, that's why I do this job. I've been doing this for 20-something years.
I assume they were only hers, but now that you've asked me that question,
you wondered where the heck your toenails went.
They may have ended up in that jar. Yes, that's true.
So, what about audiences? So, how long have you been doing stand-up? For a living, and I'm maybe using that loosely because I don't know how well it's going for you.
Well,
how long have you been doing it for a living?
I get to eat once a week, which is great. So
once a week, that's how you stay so trim.
Very well. That's why I'm so thin and slender. Yes, but I perform all different types of shows. I mean, I do acting in films, commercials. I do live shows. So I've been doing this for I don't know, on and off for probably 10 years or so.
So are audiences as neurotic as the talent?
Audiences sometimes are more neurotic, especially if you get them involved in the show and you get them to interact as themselves. Or
so you do that at your own risk.
Oh, it's so funny. But you know what? Sometimes they surprise you by showing you their real selves, and then they're really funny. I mean, when they're just as awkward and as uncomfortable, or that sort of inner performer comes out, that's when it's comedy gold. So
are a lot of these people using comedy in lieu of the serious therapy work they should be doing, both on the stage and in the audience? Well,
I think a lot of them are doing it at work. I mean, I hear stories, and I've worked with people who try to be like the funny guy at the office, and you can tell that they just desperately want attention, and they want to get that thing out, whatever that situation is. So they'll spend their days trying to, entertain their coworkers instead of actually writing it down, creating an act, doing the hard work of the business of comedy and performing. No, they'll just annoy the hell out of the cubicle next to them, repeatedly all through the week. So I'm always telling people, like, channel that stuff, write it down, write those jokes down, write those bits down, take the stuff you've done at work or that's in your life right now, and find a way to get on stage with it.
Yeah. All right. Acting made. What's this? Acting made stupid simple.
Yes.
Acting made stupid simple. That's what we got going on. We got us coming on is coming on September 14th, which is tomorrow. Is on Saturday.
That's
tomorrow.
Right, it's tomorrow.
And then you got from 1 to 4 p.m. We should have got you here earlier so we could have a little more time. I might have even showed up for that.
That'd be fantastic.
I don't think I can do it, though, because I didn't get enough warning.
You sleep in on Saturdays, don't you?
Exactly.
Admit it.
And so 1 to 4 p.m., where's it going to be at?
I've got a private location in the Museum District. I'm going to be helped by an actress who is on Under the Dome right now on CBS. She's going to be helping out, Crystal Martinez. And so we're going to be at a private location in the Museum District, really close to all the museums.
Is Dick Cheney going to be there?
Who knows? He just might show up.
Private location? He can't
it's possible.
But they're going to have to call to find out where the location is.
They've got to call, and my number is everywhere on the internet, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I never get any prank calls though, which is really bizarre.
Usually bill collectors.
Pretty much bill collectors, yeah, or an ex-wife.
Ex-wife,
yeah,
exactly. Occasionally the child you didn't even know you had.
In Nebraska, I've never been to Nebraska. That's not even possible.
The world is it's a small world after all. All right, 713-817-3611. 713-817-3611. I laughed. I cried. It was the longest segment in my career. Marc Isaacs, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
When we come back, much more for you. I do want to remind you the best content here shows up over there at usdatareview.com. But I tell you, if you want to check out that whole side of you, call them, 713-817-3611. More after this.